Good morning, everyone. It's not as easy as it sounds to apply for an interview for jobs after 50. I left corporate America in 2024 and I sent out my resumes way before I ever left. I already had other irons in the fire. I don't ever recommend quitting cold turkey unless you have a giant savings account or plans in place to quit. It wasn't a spur of the moment decision for me. When I left, I had it all planned out and thought through. It probably would have benefited me to have a professional resume company update my resume because I had such a diverse background. I had done a lot of things in my lifetime before 50. And therefore, when I went to interview, I don't think my true work ethic or my true skills or capabilities came through on my resume. You really want to highlight your skill set for the job you're applying for, because that's one thing I did not do. I just used the same resume for every job I applied for. I did land a job. I came out of corporate America from a desk job. I'm not good with numbers, but I was good with analytical research, statistics, data, stuff like that. And I knew my skill set. There was a job on Indeed, and I applied for it because it said it was an office job, and it was basically making a lot of phone calls, and it was, sitting down a lot, but I was used to that. Specifically in the title of this Indeed job, it said it was for customer service. I'm excellent with customers, I'm excellent with clients, I'm excellent with customer service. I thought, I'm very qualified for this position. But the surprising part was it wasn't a desk job at all. It was a stand on your feet all day long job. Now, I can do that now because I've been out of corporate America for a really long time, but at the time, I had a sit down job for 6 years. The job was actually a 3-month temporary position. None of this came across on Indeed. And it was customer service, it was phone work, but think more like you walk into Target or Walmart. And this wasn't a retail store, but just think about those places for a minute and think about you go up to the courtesy desk and they're there, standing there all day, waiting for somebody to bring in a return. That was the similar concept. I would be on a trial basis for 3 months, which scared me because I was looking for long-term, not for temporary employment. If I wanted that, I could have went to a temp agency. I would be manning the phones, but I would also have other duties that would incorporate some paperwork and reports, similar to my last desk job. However, I would be graded on how many tasks I completed within a 3-month period. And if I didn't do what they expected or I did less, I would be let go. And I thought, I don't have time for this. In my 50s, I really don't have time to fool around. You either want me or you don't. Because after 50, I developed this perspective different than when I was 20, you see. When I was 20, I could go job interviewing, and if I didn't get the job, it was no sweat. This time I was more particular, and I'm not going to settle for anything. Because at 50 and above, we have skills that we've learned through our dedicated lifetime of working. We've worked for somebody else. We've gone and done that already. I'm at the point in my life where I bring the skills to the table. But in this job, it wasn't even as advertised on Indeed. So right off the starting gate, it wasn't going well. And I could sense it. I could read the room. The interviewer was a lovely person. He was very bright and cheery, enthusiastic. He actually really, really wanted me to work there. But then this happens. He said to me, I see that you have really good skill sets. I see that you've had a lot of experience doing diverse things, and we are looking for a candidate that brings what you bring here. He said, but I do not think you are the right person for this job. He recommended me for a different job. It wasn't on Indeed yet, but it had been advertised. Nobody had applied for the position, and it was doing something totally different. But it was a desk job. I'd be able to sit down for most of the day. And he said he really liked my attitude, my appearance. I was professional. And because of that, he wanted me to come back and interview again. but the person that would be interviewing me was somebody else. And I agreed. I was like, yeah, that's really kind of you. Thank you so much for recommending this job. I really appreciate it. Thank you for your time interviewing me for this one. And that's how we left off. A couple weeks after the first interview, I did get a phone call and they invited me back to interview with a second person for a different job altogether. The day of the interview, though, it was pouring like monsoon rains. And we don't get that here very often. So I knew I had to leave extra early because the commute was going to be terrible. I finally get there. I'm early, as is, because I made sure to leave early. And it was raining so hard, but thankfully I had an umbrella. So I got out of my car with my umbrella, covered my clothing. I was dressed very professionally. I get in the door, I'm soaking wet, I'm like shaking my umbrella out the door, So I said hello, and I was there for an interview. And she asked me what I was interviewing for, and I told her. And she says, oh, that's with so-and-so. I forget the guy's name. Say Tom, for example. Tom will be right with you. I said, okay, that's great. So she sat me down in this computer room. There were a couple of people working in there, and it was very cold. It was like fall and winter time, and this is late 2024. And I thought, wow, this is crazy because it's so cold in here. They had like the air on, but it's actually, I'm sitting here with a sweater and I'm wet from the rain. So I got very chilled. And I'm like, oh, please, teeth, don't chatter. You know what I'm saying? Like, I didn't want to make any noise with my teeth or disturb anybody working. And then the interviewer came in, but he came in really late. He came in 20 minutes late. When he came in, he was abrupt. He was cold. He was not like the first interviewer at all. And he said, come in here in this little tiny, tiny closet of a room. There was a desk, a rolling chair, and then there was a metal folding chair that he sat me in. He was definitely not the supportive, upbeat, friendly, outgoing interviewer that I had before. It was very disappointing. This guy was blatantly rude. It was obvious that I was not the right candidate. I felt like I was wasting my time. I was upset that I had driven over there to be treated like this. I didn't tell him that though, I went along with the interview very professionally. And the first interviewer, he really appreciated my skills. He seemed very enthusiastic about what I brought to the table. And I thought, was I set up? Is this a joke? I felt slighted. And don't get me wrong, I don't feel like anybody owes me anything. So don't feel like it's a matter of I should have had that job. It's not like that at all. I just felt like this man is rude. I don't even want to work for this man. Never mind interview with him, I came out of corporate America with bad managers. I didn't want to go into another job with a worse one. The man started the interview. He was very stern and blunt. He handed me like a 5-page paper and it had all the duties, assignments, and it was really overwhelming. I came from a job where I had previously worked 60 to 80 hours a week. I'm not afraid of hard work. I have a really good work ethic. I'm not afraid to tackle anything. But this job description was horrendous. And I'm thinking to myself, how on earth could anybody accomplish this in a day? Never mind a week or a month. This would take a year to do. And he looked at me and he says, is there a problem? And I said, no, listen, I came out of a corporate job. I worked 60 to 80 hours a week. I was very good at my job. But I'm looking at this job description and the duties on here exceed what I did at my old job. I said, I'm not understanding what all this is and why one person is required to do this. I'm going to put up with this greedy mentality of we're going to work you to the bone anymore. And it's like the pay wasn't that great. It was less money than what I was making in corporate America. Why would I take a job with a pay cut that had more duties? So I told him my opinion. And I said, I'm not trying to be rude here. I said, but you're not really giving me any reason to want the job. I said, the prior interviewer told me that this job would be a sit-down job. I said, I don't mind standing, but having coming out of a job that I worked for years sitting at a desk, typing, doing secretarial support, things like that, I don't know if I can stand on my feet all day. Does this position require somebody to stand, or is it a sitting position? Unlike the original interviewer who told me it would be a sitting position, this interviewer changed his tune and said, no, it's going to be 50-50. You're going to be required to sit and you're going to be required to stand. And I said, required? What do you mean required? and he wasn't coming forth with the details. You could tell the moment I walked in there, he had a thing against me right off the bat. And he said to me, I know you're qualified for this position. And I said, yeah, I'm certainly qualified for this position. I said, I don't know if I want the position, but do you have a hesitation? I said, let's be frank here. Let's cut out the nonsense. Let's talk person to person instead of interviewer and interviewee. What is the job? What are your hesitations? And I'll tell you mine. So after that, we kind of hit it off. We had mutual respect. Now, I normally would not do that in a job interview, but for this one, I felt it was necessary to get some of the nitty-gritty out of the way. And he basically told me I would be a customer service support person. So then he made a reason not to hire me. It was not in the job description, but he made it a requirement. He knew from the prior interview I had from the notes that said I could not lift over 50 pounds. I can probably lift between 50 and 75. It's not that I'm not strong, it's neck and back issues. So that's why I don't try to lift anything heavier. So he hand wrote in the job description before me that I would need to lift over 50 pounds on a daily basis. And that was not true at all. I would never have to lift anything more than a stapler. I looked at him and I said, are you serious right now? He goes, yeah, I am. I said, but that's not even part of the job description. He says, well, I just made it part of the job description. I said, wow, you really don't want me in this job, do you? And he said to me that they have high turnover there. And I said, gee, I wonder why. And he said, well, I'm just not getting a good feeling about you. And I said, is it because I speak my mind? And he said, I don't know. I just don't think this is the right position for you. And I said, it's really too bad that we couldn't see eye to eye, because the first guy that interviewed me was wonderful. He saw me for who I was. He saw my skills. He saw my values. He saw my work ethic. And he saw what I brought to the table. You put your best foot forward. And even then, it's not you. I don't know what is going on in the world today with these managers they hire. And I'm sure there are good managers out there. It just has not been my experience. After 2019, managers in my corporate America workplace were inexperienced, unqualified, and downright obnoxious. Prior to then, I had excellent managers. So I don't know what's happening with manager requirements. I don't know what's happening with manager training. Maybe there's a lack of it. Maybe that's why. You would think when an organization, business, a company is hiring, they would put managers in the interview room that are trained with people. You would think that they would have people that can pick up on your skills, your ethics, what you bring to the table, and not have an attitude right in the door. It just goes to show you that no matter what you do, sometimes you're not going to get past the barrier if it's just a bad manager. Now, I did go on to interview and got a job at a car dealership where I worked 90 days. I chose to leave that job because it was horrendous, and it was worse than the corporate America job I had. Plus, I had a lot of pressure in car sales. You have a quota to meet. You deal with people that are spending a lot of money. And what happens? They get mad. They get angry. Just where I didn't want to be, in the angry public. So these are just some basic notes to self. If you're looking for a job after 50, consider who is the hiring or interviewing manager. Who are you interviewing with? If they show up with a bad attitude, it's kind of funny though. You know, they tell us as people being interviewed, have a great attitude, dress professionally, but then the managers show up and they're not professional. They don't have a good attitude. And I felt like it was a complete waste of my time. However, I don't want to leave this on a negative note. If you do experience this in a job interview and you go to different job interviews and you experience this, here's the thing about that, right? Turn it into a learning moment. Put your best foot forward. Shine your brightest light. Use it as experience. Use it as practice. It doesn't hurt to practice. So even if you look at it like a waste of time, You got some practice in, and that's how to keep a good attitude about it. If you go into a job interview and somebody treats you like this Tom that I just talked about, it's okay to not want that job. It's okay to not feel bad. It's okay to say to yourself, I don't think this is the job for me. You know, sometimes we get into a desperate place and we think, well, I just need to feed my family. I just need to pay my mortgage. But then you end up settling for a place you're not going to be happy at. So if you want it for a temporary position, that's one thing. But if you're looking for a permanent position, read the room, read the interviewer. Don't let them bully you. Don't let them antagonize you. Don't let them overwhelm you with falsities written into your job description. Don't let them do that. Because I spent 6 years at a place where I was not happy that ruined my health. So even though it may seem harder and downright disappointing, discouraging, do what's right for you. All around, do what's right for you. Don't settle for a place. Think of it like this. You are worth it. You are worth it. Your skills, your ethics. Think of it like that. You are your own inspiration. Sometimes managers in these positions, especially the ones I've dealt with, they're jealous. That's what it boils down to on a lot of occasions. They're jealous because they don't come with your skill set. They don't come with your ethics. When I left corporate America, you know what they said to me? You are a very hard worker. Well, they should have thought about that now, huh? They've had trouble finding people. They have such high turnover now, they can't keep anybody there. I stayed for 6 years in terrible working conditions. They can't even find anybody to work now. But yet they don't appreciate it. So you don't want to jump out of the oven and go into the fire pit. Even though work may be scarce in your area, even though you don't want to take a job at McDonald's, a lower paying job to get by until you can find the right job, keep your head held high. There is a job out there for you. One that you don't have to deal with a jealous manager who's jealous of you and your skills. One where you can go into work where people say hello, good morning, respect. Because that's what it's all about. If you're going to go to a job every day, it should be about mutual respect. It shouldn't be about a manager who looks down on you because they're intimidated by you. If you are job hunting today and you are seeking the right job and you know you're the right candidate, don't lose hope. Keep your head held high and know that the right job is out there. It is. It is out there somewhere. And you'll be happier than you can ever imagine. Thank you so much for watching today.